Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Admin in Denmark. And if you have watched the last episode, we talked about why I bought the Sony ZV-E10 camera. And in the next few videos, the plan is to share with you the lenses that I use with this camera so that you can also get an idea on what are the lenses that you can purchase to use with the camera. Right, so I will have to start with the lens which I use the most often, and that would be the Sony 55-210mm. It's the f4.5 to 6.3. So this lens has been out in the market for quite a number of years. I don't remember exactly how many. So it's nothing new, nothing groundbreaking. You can still buy it new in the shops. So that's one option to consider. You can also find many sellers who are trying to sell their lens, because this lens actually comes with some of the APS-C cameras that you can buy. So you can find quite a number of sellers who are trying to sell this lens as secondhand. And if you are patient enough, you should be able to find something that's relatively new, unused, and in a very good working condition. Given that this lens has been out in the market for several years, I do not want to spend too much time about the performance. You can find many videos online on how the lens performs compared to its competitors. But there are some standout features for this lens. I think the first thing is the range, right? So the range is incredible for its price range. So as you can tell from the name of the lens, so 55-210mm means that you can actually shoot quite far away. It's a telephoto lens. So this allows you to shoot something from further away and capturing that narrower field of view. So that's one benefit of this lens. The second benefit of this lens is, despite the range given by the lens, it's still relatively small size, right? So of course we have to take it with a pinch of salt. If you put this next to the wide angle lens that I have here, so this is another basic lens from Sony. This is the 16-50mm lens from Sony. That's obviously much smaller, but then if you try to find something that offers the same amount of range as this lens, you will struggle to find something as small as this. So I think this is something that this lens do offer, especially beginners when you are not 100% sure on whether you are comfortable lugging around a big lens. I think this can be a good buy. The third thing that I want to share with you is the optical steady shot capability. When we talk about optical steady shot, we have to perhaps talk a little bit more about the wider Sony strategy.
One eternity later.
I'm kind of moving away from the key topic on why I think the Sony optical steady shot is important. It's mainly for photography. So it's less so for taking videos. If you are into video making, again, you don't have to worry so much about getting lenses that has the optical steady shot. You don't have to worry so much about the in-body stabilization, because the Sony ZV-E10 does record gyro data. So you can do some post-processing. It doesn't take too much time. You can do some post-processing, use catalyst browse, and you should get gimbal-like footages for your videos. But then when it comes to photos, so this optical steady shot is quite useful because it allows you to shoot at lower shutter speeds, which means that you can bring in more light, use a lower ISO when you're shooting in certain lighting conditions. So the only way for you to get around, if you don't have in-body stabilization like Sony ZV-E10 and you're trying to shoot something that's fast moving, or perhaps the lighting condition is not so good, you have to increase your shutter speed to make sure that the photo is still sharp, but then you sacrifice on the amount of light that your camera can capture. So you then have to bump up your ISO, and you might end up having an image which is which might be a little bit noisier, especially now that we are talking about the APS-C line, where the sensor is a little bit smaller than the typical full frame sensor. So having cheap Sony camera lens with optical steady shot, it's a lifesaver, right? So you can go out there, grab the photo that you want, simply because you can shoot at a much lower shutter speed. The downside with this lens, however, is the relatively smaller aperture. So it ranges between f4.5 to f6.3, which means that you might not get as much blurry background as you might get with another lens that is able to shoot at a much bigger aperture. So that's something that you might need to think about. But for myself, for my use cases, when I go out and shoot photos, given the range of this telephoto lens, given the narrow field of view, you generally don't miss the blurry background, because depending on what you shoot and the distance that you're shooting at, most of the time the background is going to be blurry. So you don't have to be too worried about the aperture. So the last thing I just want to highlight here is that for this camera, if you want to use the gyro data, you want to do catalyst browse, make sure to switch off the optical steady shot on your camera setting, because I have made so many mistakes that I tried to shoot something and I thought that I'll be using catalyst browse to stabilize the video, but I forgot that I didn't switch off the optical steady shot. So just keep that in mind if you are out there shooting with this lens. Great, I shared a lot about this lens. I hope you find it useful. Even though now it's 2023, I'm sure this lens can still serve many people very well. Leave a comment if you have this lens and have some thoughts about this lens as well. I think the price is fantastic for the amount of performance you can get out of this lens. And that's it. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye!